from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you on this Thursday night. Our phone number for the evening, every evening, honestly, is the same every evening. I'm just trying to remember it. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to jump into the big story. Again, it's still the big story of the day. Will the Senate pass the amended version of the debt bill? I don't know. I didn't know what was going to happen in the House. I was surprised, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was going to be that overwhelming of a vote, but it was. So let's see what happens now. I'm totally like a fish out of water with this one. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think it might happen during the show. So we're going to bring you that as soon as it happens. Now, the holding of the FBI director in contempt of Congress continues to be a thing. And again, we've seen this happen in the past, even in extreme cases where it's been overhyped and overdone, like when they put Peter Navarro in leg irons. Even in a case like that, we saw there still isn't much being done there, right? I feel like they just wanted to make a point. They wanted their pound of flesh, if you will. They wanted to embarrass Peter Navarro. And if I had to guess, I'd say he's probably not going to end up doing time over this, right? They wanted to treat him unfairly. And I don't think we're going to get that with Ray. I just don't think it's going to be the case. I don't think anything happens. But that's the case. Now, with respect to Hunter Biden has this gun case where, you know, he lied on an application about being addicted to a controlled substance when he purchased a firearm. And then there were some other stories about putting the firearm in the dumpster of a convenience store and someone else retrieving it and FBI agents being involved and looking the other, all sorts of craziness, right? All I can tell you is the ATF is very skeptical that there's going to be a charge on Hunter Biden for that infraction, if you will. So that's that. And, of course, President Biden, Joe El Baboso Biden. Now, listen, I do wish him the best. And he fell down during the United States Air Force Academy graduation ceremony today. And I feel badly about this because I don't want to see the commander-in-chief fall down. Every day, Joe Biden does something, whether intentionally or by accident like this, that makes America look weak. And it gives new meaning to the term that I use for him, Joe El Baboso Biden. So he's not just, talking his babosadas, but he's like a bumbling, drooling old man from time to time. And then he has these moments of clarity where he's like a straight up political gangster. And I don't know which one he is when, depending on what time of the day it is. It doesn't look good for America. That's all I could say. I think there's people that sympathize with that. Listen, I had an old man, my dad, tough guy when I was growing up. As he got older, he got skinnier. He lost a lot of muscle mass. He lost a lot of memory, lost a lot of his mental acuity. And he was a cute old man. He became a shell of himself. And it was hard to watch and hard to see. But that's exactly how life happens. That's what aging looks like. And Joe Biden is definitely on that road. He's not the man he used to be. He's not the same guy that wiped the floor with Paul Ryan when he was running for vice president back in the day. So that's that. The border continues to be an absolute, I don't want to say it's a disaster because I should say it's a tremendous success for Biden's policies, right? The policies that Biden's created where they've created an app and they've created a system where you allow people into the country and we just tell them, hey, I hope that you'll self-report and I hope that you'll show up to court one day. And if not, well, good luck and God bless. Here's a cell phone. Here's a debit card. Take care. Brush your hair. Right? And I think that's a complete success. That's what Biden wanted to do, and that's exactly what he's doing. So that's that. On the other hand, you've got Rand Paul. Senator Rand Paul is playing hardball here, and he says, you know what? Until we see what's going on with how much of this money is going to COVID, what's what with the COVID stuff, with part of the debt ceiling bill and the rest of the documents that he's asking to see, he's promised to not vote, so he's going to block every single nominee that Biden puts before the Senate until he gets what he's asking for in terms of these COVID documents. So good on Rand Paul. Some will say he's an obstructionist. I'm going to say I think he's doing it right. If everybody played that same game, we'd have a little gridlock and we'd probably get somewhere eventually. So good job, Rand Paul. And the Attorney General in Indiana is leading an 18-state lawsuit against the Biden administration on their border policies. So we'll dig into that a little bit later as well. But I want to jump into just a little bit of audio because Kevin McCarthy was taking a victory lap today. And again, I don't want to trash him. I wasn't there is all I could say. I wish that we'd gotten more. I wish that things would have gone better. But I can say that we have a deal. And it's not the deal that I wanted. You know, it's kind of like, I guess, when you go car shopping. Not to oversimplify, but you go with a plan in mind. You're like, I want to pay this much for this kind of car. And sometimes it doesn't go your way. And it doesn't mean you like the car any less, but you just are a little bit less enthused about the deal, right? And lamentably, that's the case. And a lot of really intelligent people that I respect, people that have been on this program, voted for this bill. And I think they voted so in good conscience, not because they were looking to sell out, but because they felt that was the right way to go. I mean, this is what I'm speculating, right? This is my conjecture here. So we'll see how that pans out. But McCarthy has a couple of things that he said tonight, and last night, excuse me, and I want you to hear two clips from McCarthy. The first, he's talking about how they made history, and this is the biggest cut in savings that Congress has ever voted for. Listen to this.
I've been thinking about this day before my vote for Speaker, because I knew the debt ceiling was coming. I wanted to make history. I wanted to do something no other Congress has done, that we would literally turn the ship, that for the first time in quite some time, we'd spend less than we spent the year before. Tonight, we all made history, because this is the biggest cut and savings this Congress has ever voted for. And it's not that we're just voting for it. This is going to be law. $2.1 trillion.
So that's, again, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, very proud of the work he's done. He does a great job selling it. I think perhaps, there's moments where I look at this bill and I go, man, I wish we could have done more. There's moments where I go, come on, you got to be kidding me. Stop overselling it. Then there's moments where I go, you know what? Everything he's saying is true, right? It's not that he's saying anything that's not true. The question becomes, did you leave something on the table? And I don't know the answer to that, but to help us make sense of it, we're going to check in with President Trump's former deputy assistant to the president, Hogan Gidley. He's now the communications director at the America First Policy Institute. He's scheduled to join us right after this, so don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Tonight, I hope we proved it to you again, that we put the citizens of America first. And we didn't do it by taking the easy way. We didn't do it by the ways that people did it in the past by just lifting it. We decided that you had to spend less, and we achieved that goal. Is it everything I wanted? No. But sitting with one House, with a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president who didn't want to meet with us, I think we did pretty dang good for the American public.
That's Speaker Kevin McCarthy last night giving his comments and taking a victory lap on this deal. Our guest is Vice Chair of the Center for Election Integrity and Senior Advisor for Communications at America First Policy Institute, former Deputy Press Secretary and Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Hogan Gidley. Welcome to the program.
Rich, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
You bet, my brother. Thanks for staying up late. America appreciates it as well. So let's dig in here. I'm honestly of two minds. There's things that I like about this debt deal. There's things that I don't like about the debt deal. I feel like it's a little bit of an affront on everybody when everybody just starts trashing McCarthy and all Republicans as rhinos because they took the deal. And then I think, are they? I'm kind of vacillating here. And I realize it's an emotional thing because, we had our high hopes and we landed somewhere else. But I'm also a realist and worked in government and realized there's compromise that goes into these types of things. So what say you?
Well, I'm so glad you put it that way because two things can be true at once. Is everything in this bill good? No. I'd argue a lot of things don't track with the America First policies that Donald Trump put in place, that so many of us want out here. But at the same time, there are political realities that exist where we only control 1/3 of the levers necessary to get a bill passed. And so is it the best deal McCarthy could get? I don't know because I wasn't in those negotiations. I can tell you it's better than I thought it would be, but to call it a quote unquote good deal, I'm not sure because I wasn't in the negotiations. I can tell you though, I don't like much that's in it, but because we only control the House and Joe Biden said he wasn't going to negotiate at all, McCarthy forced his hand here. It was a really savvy political move. And he did so because Republicans at our core, we don't like, it is a hard vote to raise the debt ceiling. It's hard for us to do. For Democrats, they don't care because they've never met $1 of your paycheck they wouldn't like to spend. So that doesn't bother them. So the fact McCarthy was able to do that, I think it wrong-footed the Democrats. They didn't know what to say. They came out and said, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to default. We can't default. And we were like, yeah, we know. We already passed the bill. No, we're not going to default. Weeks later, Schumer was saying the same thing. And we were like, no, we know we already passed the bill. So McCarthy did some yeoman's work here to get something accomplished. But it really highlights a bigger issue, and that is elections have consequences. If we don't control the House, if we don't control the White House, and we don't control the Senate, then, we got problems. So if we can get back to where we're winning these elections and controlling these chambers, then we'll be a whole lot better off. I think that kind of is the lesson from this negotiation is we got to win more elections. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, listen, I get that. And I think there's also, some introspection that I draw from it, right? I guess politically speaking from the perspective of a movement conservative, I think we also can't be so knee-jerk, I feel, right? I think we can't start hating everybody at Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene that voted for this bill and said, oh, my God, I can't believe they sold out. I don't believe it's appropriate for us to do that. I don't think we'll ever move forward. We don't have to be lockstep, and I don't believe in groupthink. But I also don't think we should demonize anybody that we disagree with on something like this, because I think at the end of the day, we don't win that way. What's your take on that?
I agree 100%. Now, look, we need a fighter to get things done in Washington, D.C. I think Donald Trump proved that. And for decades and decades and decades being part of politics at this point, 25 years, I started under Mike Huckabee when he was governor. So I've known Sarah Sanders, for example, since she was 19. I've been doing this a long time, and I see the anger that has been roiling on our side for a while because we've been ignored, because of the dual system of justice. And a lot of things that Donald Trump did not only highlighted the problems with the swamp, but he fixed a lot of the problems. I mean, he drained a lot of it, but there's still some bottom feeders down there doing their darndest to try and tear us apart behind the scenes. What we thought was happening, we now know was happening. The proof is there. So there are a lot of reasons to be angry and a lot of reasons to be mad. But I think you're right here. To vilify the speaker on this particular issue doesn't really take into account all of the issues at play here. As I mentioned, when you have to work with a Senate that doesn't want to give you anything, a White House that doesn't want to talk to you at all, it takes some doing to get it done. And, when we're in the back rooms, you want to say the things you want to say to one another right to their face, that's fine. Do it to the press, I've never really been a big fan of, even though I'm in the media, work in the media, in comms and press for candidates. But I think your point's valid, and I think it's right. I think we got to be constructive. We got to figure out how to work together. And remember, the left is always on the same page all of the time because they operate as a collective. The right, we're by our very nature more individualistic. But politics is a team sport. And if you're going to win, you got to kind of row in the same direction a lot of times. It's harder for us to do it, I said, by our very nature. But I think we're getting better at doing it in large measure because of people like Donald Trump and people like, McCarthy and others who are trying to bring together different factions within the Republican Party and point out the need to work together to accomplish what we want.
And, Hogan Gidley, I want to just highlight that point because I think it's a really interesting one. You mentioned we have to debate with the White House. We have this infighting with Schumer. But it's not just Schumer, right? It's also McConnell, right? It's not as if the House Republicans are going to get a deal with McConnell the way they're going to get one with Schumer. It's sometimes they're two sides of the same coin. So, I think Republicans have their work cut out for them when it comes to that type of deal. Now, I want to pivot right before we get to the break, and we'll continue beyond the break, a little bit about the border. Right? I'm looking at this piece here, and it's from Daily Caller, Jenny Tarrant. The headline, the Biden administration will admit thousands more illegal migrants each month through a phone app. And to me, it seems, earlier I corrected myself in my opening monologue saying, the border's a disaster. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take it back and say it's an absolute success for those who created this policy because it seems like what they planned is working, right? They've allowed for this to happen. They've opened up the gate, literally. They've created the app. They've told the border agents to become travel agents, to get these people onto buses, to bust them into the interior of the country or get them on planes. And it seems to be working exactly as they planned. And I for the life of me, I can't, I guess in good conscience, I can't say it's a disaster for them. It's a disaster for you and me and the rest of America. So I just wanted to lay that out there to set the stage. I also wanted to remind everybody of who you are. So let me do that. Folks, we're on with Hogan Gidley. Hogan Gidley's vice chair for the Center of Election Integrity and a senior advisor for communications at the America First Policy Institute. He's also the former deputy press secretary and deputy assistant to President Trump. So we've got somebody well qualified to give us that answer. And Hogan, I think the last time I saw you, we were backstage somewhere at CPAC, and I've seen that you've maintained a really busy schedule. I see you on TV all the time. Where are you still in D.C.? What's going on?
Still in the swamp, sadly. And whenever I get a call to go give a speech around our great country, I always take it. And they always say, thank you so much. I said, no, thank you. You got me out of the swamp for a couple of days. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right, we're coming right back with Hogan Gidley. Don't go anywhere. If you want to call us, feel free. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Of course, that's Valdez with an S on all the social media as well. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
In the weeks leading up to Title 42's expiration, they stoked fears that we would see chaos and massive numbers of migrants crossing at the border. And yet, what happened? Thanks to the policies put in place by the Biden administration, the numbers at the border dropped by 70% following the expiration of Title 42. But the fear-mongering continues. Unfortunately, my colleagues are not ones to let facts get in the way of a good story.
Ay, bendito. That's Congressman Jerry Nadler at a hearing on the border crisis about a week ago. And this is how they try to spin it. Chuck Todd was saying that it's not really the Biden administration's fault, but it's the Republicans' fault that we're having the mess that we have. What say you, Hogan Gidley?
Well, the numbers tell the story. And the fact is we had the lowest numbers of border crossers under the Trump administration. We had lower numbers of human trafficking, child smuggling. Drugs weren't pouring into our nation, killing our children, killing people across our communities. And now they are. And you talked about, before we headed into the break, about the competency of the Biden administration on this. There's no question the Biden administration's incompetent. But this particular matter, as you point out correctly, is by design. This is something they want to do because they care about gaining and maintaining political power. So they want to flood this country with people they can get on the government dole as soon as possible, and then they're going to take credit for it, and then they're going to try and make those people voters. That's what it's about. Because, look, the American people, polling is clear. Not only do they want illegal immigration stopped, they want a reduction in legal migration in this country, too. We're one of the kindest, most generous nations on the planet, letting in a little bit more than 1 million people a year legally in America. This administration has let in 6 million already. That's the ones we know about. It doesn't include the gotaways. So there are tens of millions of people coming into this country illegally and unlawfully. And this is all by design from the left. And what makes me the most frustrated is every time someone comes into this country illegally and commits a crime, whether that be driving while intoxicated, whether that be a rape, whether that be a murder, whether that be a burglary, a robbery, anything at all, every one of those crimes is 100% preventable, every one, because they shouldn't be here in the first place. And this country, no question, as I mentioned, is one of the most generous, but you have to do it the right way. And this administration refuses to do that, refuses to acknowledge there is a right way, bragged about doing everything opposite when they came in. Watch how we're going to do everything different than Donald Trump. The exact opposite. Now there are children being sold into slavery coming across our border, being sold into slavery, as a recent report showed. So what is going on is horrific for the people in America. It's horrific for those trying to get here because it's a dangerous journey. And they've been told they can be let in. They've been given phones. They're given room and board in a lot of instances. So this is a real problem for this country. And I think the Biden administration not only is they do turn a blind eye to the politics of it because they think eventually it's going to pay off and they don't care.
Folks, we're on with Hogan Gidley. He's vice chair for the Center for Election Integrity and senior advisor for communications at America First Policy Institute. He's also former deputy press secretary and deputy assistant to President Trump. Now, Hogan Gidley, in addition to this app that people are using on their phones to, set up their immigration court dates, something else they can do is listen to a new podcast hosted by you. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, we work at a think tank here in Washington, D.C., and for people who don't know what that is, basically it's an entity that works to educate not just legislators at the local level, but also at the federal level, your senators and your congressmen, on various issues, on polling data, and because we are a think tank, we thought it would be a fun thing to do because think tanks aren't necessarily thought of as fun. To get on air and do a podcast called The Tank. And we get on there and we have different guests. We had Secretary Bernhardt, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Donald Trump this first episode, a lot of fun. And while the Secretary of Interior, again, doesn't sound like a fun thing or a fun job, he is a fun guy, brilliant guy, one of my favorite cabinet secretaries that I got to work with on a regular basis. And, we put it on a podcast and we're talking about various issues of the day, talking to obviously some big guests who served in not just the previous administration, but, we have some sitting governors coming up. We have, other folks in industry coming up too, and just talking about the issues that matter to so many across this country, focusing on those America First issues that gave us success in record-setting time and that improve the lives of all Americans, regardless of race, religion, color, or creed. And, it started out fun, but we're going to build on it and make it even better in the coming weeks.
Outstanding. Now, if anybody wants to download it, let them all know where they can go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to any of our social media sites. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, so I'm at J. Hogan Gidley across all social media platforms, at J. Hogan Gidley. But then also AmericaFirstPolicy.com is our website, and there are links to it on there as well. And you can find out more about all the work we're doing across the country and all the various policy spaces. But, it's important because I have to say, when I went into the White House, I'm kind of embarrassed. I didn't realize how much the policy actually mattered to people. I'm a message guy. I'm a press guy,
right,
and have been for 25 years. I didn't realize how much it impacted families across this country. When you had a president like Donald Trump who cared about those people and wanted to right a lot of the wrongs and be a voice for the voiceless, all of a sudden in a hurry, you got to realize just how impactful those policies are for people across this country. And just to be a small part of that was a blessing beyond measure. So you can go on to AmericaFirstPolicy.com is the point, and check out some of the policies we're working on to try and get kind of everybody back on the same page of what works. 80-20 issues. These are 80% of Americans that support them, Republican, Democrat, Independent, all the way across the aisle. They're the ones that actually have been successful. And you don't have to point back to Reagan to say, look how great we were under Reagan. You can just say 2 years ago we had these things in place.
Right.
So it's time to get back to them.
Yeah. As you talk about those kitchen table topics, these policies that matter to Americans, I remember something that stood out during the Trump years was the median household income going up to something like $6,500 or $7,000 higher than it was before. And that's obviously dissipated now with the current situation, but it'd be great to see that happen again.
Sure. I mean, look, wages increased for the first time in 30 plus years. They were up around $7,000. I think they've gone down around $6,000 under Joe Biden, not to mention the crippling inflation far outpacing any wage increases that they can brag about coming out of Washington, D.C. It's hurting people. I mean, paying what you have to pay now for gas and for groceries is a serious problem, not to mention, of course, when you do flood the border and you do flood this country with people who are here illegally and unlawfully, what it does to the strain it puts on communities for first responders and for schools and for health care. All of those things are seen, as increases in what we have to pay. It manifests itself into a higher, spending problem for most Americans. Look, I heard a stat the other day, it blew my mind when you talk about the deficit, or the debt rather, in this country. And you see how many, what were it, 32 trillion, I think, in is the national debt right now. It's always hard to quantify, especially as a press person. It wears me out because you gloss over when you're talking about millions and billions and trillions of dollars.
People get lost.
Right. And then all of a sudden, someone told me this. I said, this is a great stat. If you stop spending right now, and it was just $32 trillion, and you said, okay, I'm going to pay for it using a dollar bill a second, put it on the table. So 1, 2, 3, a dollar bill per second. It would take 996,000 years to pay it off.
Wow.
That's incredible. Just put down a dollar a second to pay off that $32 trillion. It's actually it's closer to 1.1 million at this point once you put the $4 trillion on from this new bill. But you're talking about almost 1 million years it would take just dropping a dollar a second down on the table. That shows you how massive this federal government has gotten, and we're all on the hook for it. We're the ones that have to pay for it.
And our children.
So it's a real problem.
Our children's children.
Absolutely. Not even close. I mean, Christ lived 2,000 years ago, to give you a point of reference. 990,000 years? Yeah, it's going to be a while before we pay that off.
Folks, Hogan Gidley's vice chair of the Center for Election Integrity and senior advisor for communications at the America First Policy Institute. Hogan, thank you so much. Good luck with the podcast. Godspeed to you, and thanks for joining us.
Sure, and if you need me to stay the extra break, I can. I think there was some talk about staying till later, and it's fine if not.
Yeah, well, I think we got everything nailed, so I appreciate it, but I'm definitely calling on you again for sure.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
You got it, brother. Thanks. Bye-bye. All right, folks, more to come straight ahead. Your calls and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're going to the phones. Let's go to 833-4-VALDEZ. We're checking in with Elizabeth in Reading, Pennsylvania, WEEU. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
My pleasure.
I would like to comment that I heard on your show a few moments ago, Speaker McCarthy misused the English language. He said, and we are literally going to turn a ship around.
Where's this ship?
And he used the word literally incorrectly, and it may seem minor. Some people might say that doesn't matter. In my humble opinion, speaking well builds credibility for smart people. So
Yeah, I agree
if
with
only,
that
yes, if only he had used better grammar.
Yeah, well, I know people that speak a lot have a higher rate of misspeaking than everybody else because we speak more. I do it all the time. But Elizabeth, you sound very well spoken yourself. Are you an English teacher?
No.
Oh, because you sound like you could be a really good English teacher, and that's why you caught on to that so quickly. But you know, you're right, and I don't think he's the only one that uses literally wrong, because I think a lot of people use literally and they mean figuratively, you know, and they roll with it. But let's talk about the meat and potatoes of this, if you will, not literally. But figurative meat and potatoes. What do you think of the debt bill? Do you think it went far enough? Do you think McCarthy did his best job? Do you think he let us down? Do you think this is a win, albeit a small one?
Oh, I vote for the final thing you said, that it is a win at the moment, at the time. Right now, it's a way to move forward and focus on other topics. So I'm for it. I'm happy. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Again, I have my moments like that too. It just depends who's influencing me, right? Who I'm talking to say, no, we should have gone for more. I don't know if going more was an option, right? And that's really the issue. I think that I think McCarthy did squeeze a lot out of this situation, and it is a win, albeit one that I think we all would agree could have been bigger or should have been bigger. I don't know that if there was actually the political ability to make it a bigger win. Now, also, a secondary question for you. What's your take on the border? They put out this new app, right? There's this new app called CBP One. When they were making it, we had a few guests on. Tom Homan from Heritage, he was telling us about it. And now people can schedule their own appointment for immigration court rather than be given, an appointment when they're arrested at the border. They're just released and given this app saying, hey, just make sure you check in with us and let us know what's going on. What do you think?
Oh, I strongly disagree, because rules are rules and they should be followed properly. And I'll just comment, I use social media very little. I'm not good with computers or anything like that. I'm okay, but I'm not good with it. But I still don't understand why they can't just use the regular legal process that's already been there for years. That's the proper thing to do.
Yeah. Well, there's a lack of enforcement, and it's due to a lack of enforcement because of Biden and his policies, and really just saying, hey, don't enforce this or that, and let's do this and do that, and have this situation. And it's what I guess what I leave where I'm left scratching my head is, are they creating the problem so that they can offer the solution, or is it they're creating the problem to offer the solution, and they're hoping to benefit from it with increased amounts of people, right? Once you have more bodies in a particular congressional district, they can get more money because there's more people there. So that's also one that I think is probably the clearest point for me. Is I think this is all about the money. But I also think, are they creating this problem just so they can say, look, there's a lot of people here, we've got to do this now? I think ultimately there are some people that think the government can fix everything, and they break things just in order to fix them. Elizabeth, thank you for your call and your insight and your excellent diction. I appreciate you. Big shout out to everybody listening on WEEU in Pennsylvania. I am Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, if you're noticing there's new music, that's because there is breaking news, right? There's breaking news. The Senate has now passed the debt ceiling bill. This is breaking news moments ago on the floor of the Senate. Listen to this.
On this vote, the yeas are 63, the nays are 36. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
So there you have it. The Senate has called the vote. It has passed, and there we are. This thing is law, right? It's going to go to Biden. He's going to happily sign it. There's $2 trillion in savings, but there's still $4 trillion in spending. And that's the part that, I guess me being the cynic that I am, I should have expected, right, that this would be the case, because we don't have the leverage that I wish we did, right? I really do. I really do wish that we would have had a little bit more leverage to go at this a little bit stronger. But all that being said, hey, it is what it is, and we've got to move forward. One thing we can't do is dwell, right? We can't dwell on every single thing. Some people can, and if you want to, be my guest. Go right ahead. What am I going to do? I just feel when I take that approach, the only thing that happens is I become a malcontent, right? I just become so like, I can't. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You just become this kind of grumpy, curmudgeonly old person. No offense to the grumpy curmudgeons out there. I don't mean to insult anyone, but I don't want to be that guy. I just don't want to be that guy. I want to, like Reagan told me to do, right? Told all of us to do, to be a happy conservative warrior. And I think that's a good idea. And we just keep fighting, keep fighting on the next one. Keep fighting and keep fighting. And, when you can, you go in hard. So that's where we are on that. Now, straight ahead, you remember our friend, he's been on this program several times, Gregg Jarrett. You might have seen him on Hannity's program. You might have seen him on the Fox News channel. Well, he's coming up next. He's going to talk to us about his brand new book. It's called The Trial of the Century. Now, he mentioned this when he was on with us last time, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a particular case that went before the Supreme Court, and I don't want you to miss it. Plus, later on, we're going to talk with Darin Kidd. He's a coach and a trainer, and he's the author of the book, I Will Until Unlock Your Limitless Power to Succeed. So stay tuned for that. I think you're going to enjoy it. Plus, we're going to talk about the debt ceiling as well, now that that's been passed. So don't go anywhere and give us a call. Your calls are always welcome. 833-482-5337. It's Rich Valdez, keeping you company till 1 a.m. Eastern. Don't go anywhere, and definitely don't move a muscle.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And our telephone number, if you want to join us on this late night national town hall conversation, feel free to do so, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, or you could chime in online at Rich Valdez with an S on any of the social media platforms. Now, President Biden fell down today at a Air Force graduation, and I don't even want to make fun of this one. It looked like an ugly spill to me. I was embarrassed for him. I felt badly for him. It just wasn't a good look. Yet again, weakness was broadcast to all of the world by our Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden, or as I like to call him, Joe El Baboso Biden. Now, a couple other stories we're going to get to at the top of the next hour. An AI-controlled military drone turned on its human operator during a training simulation. We'll get into that. Then don't get too excited, right? Lori Lightfoot is out as mayor of Chicago, but yes, she's headed to academia. Professor Lightfoot, here she comes. So I know that's a shame. It's a shocker, but that's exactly what's happening. And I think she's going to Harvard. We'll see what happens there at the top of the next hour as well. And there's a new survey that claims 1 in 10 adults identify as LGBTQ. Now, that's probably up from a few years ago, but still quite a small number. And it makes me wonder, why is it that everywhere I turn, that's all you see? You would think everybody was LGBTQ. Anyway, there's that. Plus, we have some breaking news. That means we have breaking news music. There it is. That's the breaking news music right there that I'm talking about. Well, the Senate has approved the debt ceiling bill in a vote that happened just moments ago, and we've got the tape. Listen to this.
On this vote, the yeas are 63, the nays are 36. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
There you go. So 60 votes was all it needed. It got the 60 votes. Again, I wasn't sure if there was going to be some robust debate on that. That flew through just like it flew through in the House. I would have expected a little bit more of a rough ride, but it seems to be just a very smooth passage. Now, I want to, earlier in the first hour, I'd mentioned our buddy Gregg Jarrett. And I say our buddy because I've had Gregg Jarrett on my radio program in Philadelphia, in New York, my podcast, this program, and Hogan Gidley, so many of these wonderful people that I bring on the program, I met because I was once this, associate producer for one of the biggest talk radio programs in America, the Mark Levin Show, and working for the Great One, you meet a lot of great people. And I learned how to do this business from the Great One and some others that really took me under their wing. So it's always a pleasure to shoot the breeze with some of these folks and, hear about their new projects as well as get their opinions on things. So now Gregg Jarrett is a Fox News legal analyst. You've heard him on Hannity's program a number of times. Gregg Jarrett, welcome.
Hey, Rich, how come you don't have me on more often? What's the deal?
You're coming on, brother. Listen, I will get you a legal segment where you'll be on once a month telling us how it is. We can do
once
that.
Once a month?
Yeah,
once a day?
Love that.
You got the most popular show in America, for God's sakes. Put me on, pal.
At nighttime, for sure, brother. Well, you know what? Now that I know, I'm taking note of that, and we're bringing you on. But, Gregg Jarrett, before we jump into your amazing book, I want to get your take. Am I the only schmuck on wheels that thought this was not going to fly through the House and the Senate, or did you see that coming?
Well, listen, you are a schmuck, and so am I. And like you, Rich, I thought it would be a tougher sell, but it wasn't. So it flew right through. And, I view it as a step in the right direction. Let's get to fiscal responsibility. Let's, stop spending more than we take in. And, that's the way my wife runs the checkbook at my house, probably yours too. And it's the only responsible thing to do.
Yes, and yeah, my wife did do it while I was married. Then we weren't married, and I had to do it myself. And let me tell you, that's scary stuff
now.
When you first look at it. You're like, oh, my gosh, I think I should get married again. Unbelievable.
Right, exactly.
So, Gregg Jarrett, you wrote this amazing book, and we've heard about it in the past. And I'm talking about the witch hunt book and the Russia hoax. And these were excellent books. But Now you have a new book, right? And you're talking about not only an iconic attorney, but you're talking about a very famous trial, the Scopes Monkey trial, and the attorney Clarence Darrow. Now, last time you were on, you told us a little bit about why you were doing it, but for anybody who's tuning in for the first time now, Gregg Jarrett, tell us why you decided to write this.
Well, I was a teenager, Rich, when I grabbed a book off my father's bookshelf, and it was a biography on Clarence Darrow. My father was a lawyer. He loved Darrow. And so I picked the book, and I started reading, and I was fascinated with what I read. It was by, the great writer Irving Stone. And, the more I read, the more I admired Clarence Darrow's passion for the law, his sense of justice, his commitment to civil liberties, intellectual freedom. He cared the most about free speech. And this was a guy who dared to confront prevailing beliefs, sort of like today, right? And he opposed the demands for social and religious conformity. And he often stood alone, battling against government intrusion on individual rights, as I say, particularly free speech. His most famous trial was the 1925 Scopes Monkey trial. That was sort of an evolutionary misconception. And a couple of years ago, I decided, I'm going to go down to the courthouse in Dayton, Tennessee. It's about 7 hours from where I live. And the courthouse is closed, but I met a couple of guys who had a key, and they led me in, and they showed me the archives that, buried in the basement and the dusty archives was the original trial transcript. And I started reading it, Rich, and I was just bowled over. This really was the trial of the century. And my book, Trial of the Century, is based on the transcript. It was the most important case in American history because it stood for the proposition that nobody should be told how to think, that we all are entitled to free speech, which stands today, 100 years later, in jeopardy.
Now, I just want to, for everybody who's out there, this was a trial that put religion, science, public education, everything, right? Everything was kind of involved in this trial, and
right.
it was a big deal. And if you could set the stage a little bit so that everybody can follow along.
Well, so it pitted science versus religion, creationism versus evolution. And, this was a period in time in American history. We were on the precipice. It was either going to be, free speech or wholesale censorship. And, Rich, that's going on today. But, 100 years ago, America was standing at the precipice. We were staring into the abyss of just banning books on science, particularly evolution. And that's what states did. It was led by the great fundamentalist William Jennings Bryan, three-time presidential nominee for the Democrats. And, he was the big leader of the evolutionist movement. And they started banning books. Tennessee passed a law making it a crime to teach evolution in public schools, even though it was in the state-approved textbooks. And so, Bryant was so happy that he'd done this. He said, I'm going to be the prosecutor in the case. They arrested a 25-year-old school teacher who had taught evolution in Dayton, Tennessee, and Bryant became the prosecutor. And Clarence Darrow, who has always been my idol since I read that book by Irving Stone, was incensed. And, he had grown to hate Bryant, who was once his good friend. And he volunteered to defend Scopes for free, and he travels down to Dayton, Tennessee. And to set the stage, journalists the world over converged on this tiny town. This was the first trial broadcast live on radio to a riveted nation. I mean, everybody stopped what they were doing for a week, and they tuned in, and they listened to it. And, major newspapers were all there, banner headlines every day. And I show pictures in the book of the courtroom. And there are newsreel cameras at the back of the courtroom, and every day there was a waiting plane, engines revved to fly the newsreel footage to Chicago, where it was immediately distributed to movie theaters nationwide, right? So the world is watching. And it's a question of whether you can teach science in public schools. And Darrow knew that the stack was, the deck was stacked against him. The jurors were all, devoted, church followers. The judge was an ordained minister, for God's sakes. And Darrow was losing the case. And at the very end, he did something truly extraordinary. He called William Jennings Bryan, the prosecutor, to the witness stand. Now, of course, you can never do that, right? And the judge said, "Whoa, you can't do that." And Bryan stood up and said, "Oh, Your Honor, I have nothing to fear. I'm happy to tell this courtroom and the audience, the world, that everything in the Bible should be interpreted literally," which, of course, we know it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And the judge was like, "Yeah, okay, all right, but I'm moving it outdoors because the courtroom's going to collapse. There are too many people in here. People are fainting in the heat. And there happened to be a big stage outside the courtroom on the front lawn left over from the 4th of July. And so there you have, and I show another picture of this, you have Bryan versus Darrow, two iconic figures, a titanic clash. And thousands of people are standing in the background watching this epic battle between two of the most famous people in America. And Darrow utterly destroys William Jennings Bryan on the witness stand. So much so that...
Let's leave it as a cliffhanger right there, Gregg Jarrett, because I want everybody to hear about it, but I also want to remind them of the book. The book is The Trial of the Century. It's from New York Times bestselling author Gregg Jarrett. That's 2 G's, 2 R's, 2 T's, Gregg Jarrett. I want you to pick up 2 copies of this book because, one, you should read yourself. The other, you should give away, and do it while we're on the break because we're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez on with our guest, Gregg Jarrett. That's Gregg with 2 G's, 2 R's, and 2 T's in Jarrett. He is the author of the book, The Trial of the Century. And Gregg Jarrett, we left off where you were saying that you were, you were describing Darrow mopping the floor with William Jennings Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, this outdoor platform where the trial is occurring, Rich, it never happens today, right? Thousands of people looking on. And Darrow's cross-examination, it was mesmerizing. It was bold, penetrating questions. And he dismantled William Jennings Bryan, who fumbled and fanned himself in the searing heat. And, the crowd loved Bryan. They were his supporters. And suddenly they shifted, and they started laughing at Bryan because he had no answers to these important questions about the Bible. And look, I love the Bible. The Bible is an important book, but not everything is literal in the book. It's filled with parables and allegories. It tells us important lessons, moral lessons that we can all follow, that Darrow himself followed. And in the end, Bryant was utterly destroyed. And the crowd surges and congratulates the guy they hated, Clarence Darrow, who's always been my idol. And Darrow looked back, as I explain in the book, and there's Bryant sitting, in his chair, up on the stage, nobody around him, no friend in the world, destroyed, a broken man. And a couple of days later, while still in Dayton, Tennessee, just down the street from the courthouse, he laid down for a nap, and he never woke up.
Wow.
And it's a really I mean, it's a sad epitaph to a once great man. And I admire William Jennings Bryan as much as I do Clarence Darrow. And so, this trial shifted public opinion, and it spelled the beginning of the end of banning books. And it enabled free speech in America, which is in jeopardy today. I often say people who don't, know history or bound to repeat it. It's an old saying, not mine. And it's so true. I mean, we see it today with censorship and disinformation and, classroom indoctrination and so forth, punitive cancel culture. We're repeating history, Rich. And, if people read this book, I think they'd know better.
Well, folks, here's your chance to get the book. It just came out, The Trial of the Century. It's out in hardcover by Gregg Jarrett. 2 G's, 2 R's, 2 T's. Gregg Jarrett, let him know your website so we could drive some traffic there. I'm recommending everybody get 2 books, one for yourselves. It's summertime, and, of course, one to give away. It's summertime. Give somebody something good to read.
Well, it's very kind of you. Yeah, my website is thegreggjarrett.com. Somebody bought the website, greggjarrett.com. So it's thegreggjarrett.com. And you can click on there, and, there's a landing page for the book. You can order it. Or just go to your local bookstore. It's in bookstores nationwide. And, I just think it's such an important book. What astounded me, Rich, was that so many people I've met over the last 50 years know nothing about this. And, I shudder to think what America would be like but for Clarence Darrow and the courage of his client, John Scopes, the 25-year-old school teacher who stood up to censorship and the effort by government to silence people. And, again, we're facing that today in so many different venues.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. And every day there's a new article out about book banning. And, I think it's a different story to say that you can't teach about sex to in a kindergarten or third grade classroom. Right. As it is to say that you can discuss 2 sides of an issue like science and evolution and whatnot. I think these are things that should be discussed, and you should really have robust discussion on both sides, because that's what free speech is, right? We can talk about the Bible and we can talk about Darwin, and it just, to me, is as simple as that. And yet I
totally agree, and I bring that up in the book, especially in the epilogue of the book. I bring it full circle to today and how Darrow would react to, for example, critical race theory. Interesting.
Yeah, excellent analysis, Gregg Jarrett, like always. Thanks for joining us, brother. Check him out at thegreggjarrett.com. 2 G's, 2 R's, 2 T's. Gregg Jarrett, Godspeed, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Rich, many thanks as always. Good to talk to you.
You bet. More to come straight ahead. It's Rich Valdez. We'll be right back.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So the Senate has passed the debt ceiling bill. Yesterday, the House passed the debt ceiling bill. I'm presuming tomorrow and the coming days, President Biden will be signing the debt bill into law. And that will help the nation to continue paying its bills, avoid default, and add in a ton of extra spending, including pandemic-level spending, when there's not even a pandemic. But putting all of that aside and taking note of the pandemic and how some people took on extra jobs during the pandemic and some people lost their jobs and others, expanded their jobs, the economy has definitely changed, right? And there's a lot of people that have taken on different types of side gigs, or what they call the side hustle. And it's interesting because my own career expanded as a result of COVID, because a lot of people were afraid to come into the radio studio in New York City, and I wasn't. So many times I was the only guy on the bus into the city and then on the subway. And it was a surreal experience to see the city that never sleeps asleep, right? It was just me and the rats in some situations. But we continue now, and there's a lot of people that continue to move forward with this gig economy, the side hustle. Matter of fact, it's even age-related in some cases. We've seen some of our callers that called in recently, were younger callers, were saying that they have all different types of side hustles where they do e-commerce or drop shipping and things like that, and maybe a job somewhere, warehouse job or whatever. But they combine that to make up their full income. And it's not that, and the argument I think we were having at the time was, is Gen Z lazier than other generations? And the response from the Gen Zer that called in was, no, we're not. We just do it differently because it's a new economy, a gig economy. So I want to talk about that with coach and speaker Darin Kidd. He's also the author of the book, I Will Until, Unlock Your Limitless Power to Succeed. Darin Kidd, welcome to the program.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So let's dig in here. Is the gig economy something that is here to stay? Is it expanding? Is it shrinking? What say you?
Yeah, there's several factors that I want to talk about. Number one, it's pretty interesting that last week I was interviewed on a few different channels about an article that came out that said, look, job satisfaction is at an all-time high since 1987. And that's true, but what people didn't talk about was that 61% of business leaders say their organizations will likely have layoffs in 2023. And they're estimating 30% or more of their workforce will be laid off by the end of the year. And then 70% of the companies are likely to implement a hiring freeze in 2023. So you have all of that going on, but at the same time, the timing of, inflation increasing faster than it has in the last 40 years, interest rates, car bubble talking about going to burst, all of those things. So people are looking for a way to supplement their income, and the reason the job satisfaction was up is because employers are realizing, hey, look, it's hard to get a good employee. So when you get them, we need to do what we can to retain those employees. And so they're working hard to do that. But at the same time, there's going to be less employees. So I think it's just a perfect storm of a lot of different things that are coming into place.
I agree with you. I think there is a lot of moving parts. There's some of the economy is growing, some of it's shrinking. There's different age groups at play. And I think all of it does matter in a situation like this. And it is a relatively new idea. I mean, I remember a couple of weeks ago, I bumped into somebody at a restaurant that I frequent, and he was telling me that, he's got a regular delivery type of job, delivering beer for a beer distributor. And he says, I start at 6 a.m. I'm done by, 2, 3 in the afternoon. I'm done. I'm home. I'm doing whatever. So since I have extra time, a lot of times I'll do some Ubering and whatever, just, for extra money. And we were talking about that, and somebody else chimed in and said they did the same thing. And it was just fascinating to me how many people were doing more than one job. And it led me to believe, the gig economy is alive and well. But there was a piece recently in the New York Times, and I don't read the Times too often, but this one was an interesting piece, questioning whether has gig work become a dirty word? And the question becomes, are companies embracing it? Are companies rejecting it? What's your thought on that front?
Well, it's fascinating. I just turned 50 in March, and in my early 20s,
Happy birthday.
I was working a job. Well, thank you. And I was working a job, and I kept working harder and harder. And no matter how hard I worked, I was like, man, they're dictating what I'm worth. I'm not dictating what I'm worth, and I need to make additional income. And I can't work really any harder or any more hours than I am right now. And so I started looking for a side hustle, and I started 30 plus years ago, and I couldn't afford a franchise. I didn't have, in my early 20s, the money to go out and have a 5-year lease at several $1,000s a month, and franchises are hundreds of thousands. I owned those later, but not in the beginning. So it was actually the side gig and side hustles that started me generating extra income that taught me the life skills to go out there and, we don't make what we want, we make what we are. And so if I wanted to make more, I needed to become more, and that completely changed, my world. It's fascinating because, I'm speaking Saturday here in Dallas at an event on the power of affiliate programs and how people are looking for side hustles and affiliate programs to supplement their income. They love the flexibility. They love the freedom, and they can do it at their own pace. And so I do believe that it's here to stay. And with the prices of everything increasing and with layoffs, that are in the near future, there's only going to be more and more people that are looking for that. So the companies that are innovative, they're thinking outside the box, they're reinventing themselves. If you look at the Blockbuster and Netflix example, Blockbuster's like, look, we don't need to change. We're crushing it. And they literally laughed Netflix out of their office when they offered them to purchase something for $50 million. And now Blockbuster bankrupted $1 billion in debt, Netflix dominating. So I believe that now is the time. The biggest transfer of wealth happens during recessions, depressions, and during wars. If we do the right thing, we ask the right questions. So I believe the companies that are thinking that way, they're working harder to maybe have a little bit more flexibility, because the hybrid model, in my opinion, is here to stay. It's not going to be just remote. It's not just in the office, but it's more of a hybrid model. And if the employees are happy, fulfilled, you have a great culture, they know that there's room for job growth, all of that increases performance, productivity, profits, and it's good for the company and it's good for the employees.
Listen, I agree with that. And I think that I agree with the statement, right, that people are looking for that type of flexibility. I don't know how effective it is, and it reminds me of when Elon Musk a few months ago took a lot of heat saying, look, if you want to work here, you got to come in. You got to show up in the office, and others doing similar. And I know there was a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to do that. And there seems to be some people that love working from home, and there's others like me that I don't like working from home. I would much prefer and rather be in an environment where my colleagues are there. In the situation of broadcasting over the radio, I would love for an engineer to be here if there's something going on. I don't want to have to order one to my home studio and that type of thing. So I realize that, not every job is designed for hybrid. And how do you think we overcome some of those hurdles?
Well, first of all, I would say that my wife would agree with you. She doesn't like me working from home either. She wants me out of her hair. She's like, yeah, go to work. Why don't you? You need to do more. No, I'm just kidding. But after 30 years of marriage and 5 kids, I may not be kidding. You just don't ask her that question. Well, I believe it's just asking the right questions. It depends on the business model, depends on the company. But for the right companies, and I think there's a fine line too, because in an article that I'm sure you saw, and it's talking about the quiet quitting, right? The employees are at a point going, hey, look, you know what? I'm not going to do as much. I refuse to do more. So they're quiet quitting and doing just enough to get by. And I think that's the wrong mindset. I was taught by my mentors early on that, hey, look, my attitude was when I got laid off, the first time, and I'm like, man, this really stinks, because I was working really hard. I really wanted to move up in the company, but yet everything that I worked for just went down the drain. And I go, so next time I'm going to become so valuable. We get paid based on the value that we bring to the marketplace. I'm going to work on me so hard, because I don't make what I want. I make what I am. And if I want to make more, I need to become more. So I started working on me, like where you are your biggest asset. And I go, next time, if there's going to be a layoff, they're not going to be laying off me.
I won't be
afraid to lose me. Exactly.
Right. All right. Well, let's pause right there. Let's take a quick break. Folks, we're on with Darin Kidd. He's author and coach, speaker as well. He wrote the book, I Will Until. Unlock Your Limitless Power to Succeed. I want to talk about the book when we come back. Darin Kidd, stick around with us. Folks, if you want to join the conversation, it's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez. We're on with Darin Kidd. He is a speaker and author of the book, I Will Until, Unlock Your Limitless Power to Succeed. Darin Kidd, tell us about the book.
All right, Rich. Yeah, thanks again for having me. And, It was 25 years ago. I walked into my master bedroom, and I shut the door behind me, and I'm walking past our windows, and we had sheets tacked on the windows because my wife and I couldn't afford curtains. And there was this big 2-foot Coca-Cola plastic piggy bank where I told my oldest daughter, I'm like, hey, look, she was a little girl at that time. I go, hey, put your change in this bank, and someday we'll go to Disney World. And, someday was exactly what my dad was saying, even on his deathbed. Someday we'll do this and someday we'll do that. And
yeah.
I learned really quickly that someday leads to a town called nowhere. But I also learned that some people's some days are other people's every days, right? And so here I am. I'm dumping this bank out on the floor and going through the change, and I could smell the old change smell. And I'm sitting there going, man, God, how could I be this low where I'm bankrupt, my car's repossessed, I'm a college dropout, I can't feed my family, couldn't make it through college, our house looks abandoned, and I was just so frustrated. I was depressed, went to the doctor for depression, and my daughter walks in to see me take her money for Disney and runs out crying. And that's when I just said, I've had enough. That's it. It hurt bad enough, right? I believe, anyway, I walked in the other room and I wrote on a 3x5 index card, I go, I will until. And that was the mindset and the perspective. I tell people, you can't change your life overnight, but you can dang sure change the direction of your life overnight. And so from that point forward, I went out and, invested, thousands. It's now been multiple six figures in my education, and just worked really hard and went through thousands of books and seminars and programs and masterminds that led me to build, multiple businesses that did, several $100 million in sales and have franchises. And just, so that's why now I'm so passionate about, that book is very simple to read, but I called it snackable content, because I believe we're made in the image of our creator, and we're created for success, and the world programs us for failure. We're told more on a daily basis, more about our limitations than our possibilities. So that book is a sampling of just, hey, look, I believe that we have so much potential inside of us, and we're not even tapping even the smallest percentage of it.
Outstanding. That's a great story. And I love the philosophy behind it. Folks, we're on with Darin Kidd. He's a coach, a trainer, and a speaker. He wrote the book, I Will Until. Unlock Your Limitless Power to Succeed. We're going to continue with him straight ahead. If you have a question or comment, the phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We're wrapping up with Darin Kidd. He's a coach, author, and speaker. He wrote the book, I Will Until. And that was a great story of how you got to where you are. Darin Kidd, let's give us some closing thoughts and let everybody know why they need to get the book.
Yes, a lot of times we have goals and dreams. I mean, like many of you that are listening, we know we were created for more, but yet a lot of times we don't know where to start. And like me, I continue to have all these excuses. I mean, we can make excuses or go out and achieve our goals and dreams, but it's hard to do both. And so we're sitting there, and that was me. I'm like, man, they must come from a big city. I live in a small town. They must have a college education. At that time, I had a lack of education. They must be great public speakers. I'm not at that point. And so this just gives you a little bit of that foundation to start going in the right direction, focusing on getting just a little bit better every day and the right mindset and attitude and perspective in order to move in the direction to achieve your goals and dreams.
Outstanding. And if people want to pick up a copy of the book, how do they get it?
They can go to iwilluntil.com. iwilluntil.com. They can purchase the book. They can look at my speaking page if they're interested in me speaking for one of their events or their companies. All that is on the website.
I love the idea of I will until, as opposed to, one day we will. That's just fantastic. Darin Kidd, I want to thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Very insightful, and Godspeed to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Now, folks, in the next hour, we're going to get to your calls and so much more. I love the final hour of the program, hour number 3, because it's the homage that we do to what Larry King started back in 1978, Open Phone America, taking calls from all over the country, and it's unscripted, and I love it. Anything goes. It's on, any topic is on the table. And, of course, you can't curse or anything like that, but I'm happy to have the conversation, whether you agree or disagree. Let me give you the number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDES. We have a number of topics that we've discussed tonight that are on the table, but we also have whatever you want to bring. And I also want to remind everybody, we have lots of really meaningful conversations on this program. I mentioned earlier that, in my years as a producer in talk radio, I met a lot of people, and in my years working in politics and in business, I met people, and I've had the good fortune of, when I have a question or something I don't understand, or I want to understand a little better, I'm always able to call somebody that I know and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I love the fact that I'm able to do that on this program because, prior to hosting this particular show, I didn't bring guests on my radio show. Very rarely did I do that. I mean, maybe every now and again, or if I did, it was a one-segment guest, but it was never a long-form interview the way the format of this show is. And I love that I'm able to have these conversations really with all of you, right? Whether it's the conversation we had with President Trump or Stephen A. Smith or Secretary Pompeo or any number of newsmakers that have called into this program, the people that have called in this week and even on today's program. And it's really something that I think is just special that it is happening live and where you can call in and speak with them as well. I love that. And I love the audience here, and I just wanted to share that with you. And if you've ever missed any of the interviews that we do here, these conversations are all archived, and you can check them out on our website. Yep, there's a website for the show. It's Rich Valdez. Of course, that is Valdez with an S. Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. All together, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. We wanted to make sure it's long so you wouldn't forget it. It's memorable. But that's the website, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. You can sign up there for the website, for the newsletter. You could sign up there as well to leave a comment for the program. You could also sign up to subscribe to the podcast, or you don't have to sign up for anything. You can just press a button on any of our archive shows. If you like the particular guest, everything's there. There's a synopsis of the show, and you can go there as well. So I wanted to remind you of that because I'm supposed to remind you, I think, once an hour, and I don't rarely do as much self-promotion as I'm told to do. So I'll get better at that, I promise. By the way, tomorrow I'm looking forward to joining America's largest talk radio convention, Talkers 2023. I'll be one of their panelists, and I'm looking forward to that as well. So big thanks to Michael Harrison for the invitation. It's going to be a great time, I imagine. It's my first time speaking at Talkers, even attending Talkers. Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. I am Rich Valdez, and we'll be right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you on America's late-night national town hall forum, America at Night. And make sure you give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833, the number 4. Valdez is the phone number. And happy to speak with you guys on any topic. It's Open Phone America. I see there's calls already in the queue, and I'm going to get to you guys momentarily. But I wanted to just recap a little bit of what's going on today, because there was the big breaking news that happened during the show tonight was that the Senate voted for the bill, the McCarthy-Biden debt ceiling bill. That happened tonight. There was a vote and an announcement. Listen to this.
On this vote, the yeas are 63, the nays are 36. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
So the bill passed, and it also passed last night in the House of Representatives, where Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, gave some comments on how we are spending less, and that was part of the goal. Listen to this.
Tonight, I hope we proved it to you again, that we put the citizens of America first. And we didn't do it by taking the easy way. We didn't do it by the ways that people did it in the past by just lifting it. We decided that you had to spend less, and we achieved that goal. Is it everything I wanted? No. But sitting with one House, with a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president who didn't want to meet with us, I think we did pretty dang good for the American public.
That's Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Now, of course, Chuck Schumer weighed in tonight trying to take his own victory lap, saying, we tore this thing apart and we made it the best deal ever. Listen to this.
And very importantly, we did a very good job of taking the worst parts of the Republican plan that would have hurt so many families, and we took those worst parts off the table.
What about all the massive spending that hurts families? What about all of the unnecessary pandemic-level spending and this COVID spending that caused me to go into my favorite Cuban place to get a cup of coffee yesterday? And the owner-operator, his name is Ruben, by the way, he tells me, I didn't know we were giving money to China to investigate COVID. For what? I said, brother, we've been talking about that for a long time. You should be paying more attention and listening to this show. But unfortunately, that's exactly where we are. We're still spending that. Instead of spending $6 trillion, we're spending $4 trillion. So I will give kudos to McCarthy on that front. I don't want to slight him in any way. This is the biggest savings that what he said is true. I guess just so many of us didn't want to spend $4 trillion or see that part of it become reality, but it did. And it flew through the House and it flew through the Senate. So I guess the expectations of many Americans, at least for me, definitely don't match up with the outcomes that are coming out of Washington. But that's no surprise, right? Anyway, I want to know what you guys think about this debt bill and get your thoughts. Our telephone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Brooklyn, New York, listening to WFAS Online. Alex, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hey, Rich, thanks for taking the call. In this bill, right, there's no budget for the next year. There's no budget stuff that was passed in this bill. And so there's a lot of talk about, wow, we got a 2-year spending limit. I think that's really crap, unless I'm getting it wrong. We don't need a spending limit if it's only for 2 years when the Republicans have the House. So that's not something that we gained out of this raising of the debt deal with the Democrats. But we got insignificant stuff when it comes to clawing back on some of the bills that have passed but we didn't spend yet. But I do think that we couldn't have gotten much more. Kevin McCarthy couldn't have gotten much a better deal than what he got from the Biden administration. And that's because I don't think that Joe Biden and the Biden administration would care if we default by not having the debt raised, because then up until now, we have a bunch of disasters facing our country with inflation and wars abroad and gas prices this high. All of these things are directly linked to policies and decisions made by the Biden administration. So he blames MAGA and the Trump people and Republicans, but it's not sellable, and I don't think anybody buys it, even Democrats, because there's no truth in that. But now, if we would default, then he would say we defaulted, and his campaign slogan for 2024 would be because Republicans didn't raise the debt limit with no strings attached to it. So he'd say Republicans are responsible for all the disasters in our country, and he would have said, we were coming out of the inflation problem, and gasoline prices were going to go down, but then we defaulted because of Republicans, and that's why we're in a disastrous situation. It'd be exaggerated for sure, but there'd be some truth to it, because the fact is Republicans could have raised the debt limit with no strings attached, and if we would have defaulted, he would have had some form of argument here for 2024, and now he has nothing.
Yeah, interesting point. This is the point I've been trying to discover, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, if you're right or wrong, but I do know that I believe that Biden would have had fault if there was default, and but he was going around saying he'd be blameless. And this was the part where, some were telling me, look, you might know because you talk about this stuff every night, but most people that are at work every day aren't paying attention that closely, and they would have believed whatever they saw on the news. And if the news started telling them that Republicans caused the default and a shutdown and all of this, bad repercussions to happen, all the negativity would have been strung around the necks of Republicans, and there would have been hell to pay. And that may, in fact, be true, because it's not like we have some major media behind us. Of course, maybe major talk radio media, but outside of that, we don't have the mainstream by and large, Alex. So I think you might be right. And I think you're also right on the McCarthy thing with respect to it being the best deal that he was going to get. I think you're probably right there. And the reason I think you're right is because as I look at it more and more and I think about it more and more, I realize that this was a president who early on said he wasn't playing ball. He wasn't joining anybody at any table. And then he had to cut his trip short and come back and negotiate. Then they walked away. Then they got back together. Then they walked away again. This time then the Republicans walked away. And it seemed that, while we didn't get everything that we were asking for, or that I guess on our fantasy wish list, we got something. And I hate to look at things like that. It's kind of like when people say, listen, I'm grateful. My kids aren't axe murderers. They're not in jail. Since when is that the standard, right? Everybody's kids should not be an axe murderer and should not be in jail. So I think we should raise our own standards for what we consider a political win. But in a case like this, it's not you managing your kids and their outcomes. This is you going up against the swamp, the entirety of the swamp, and their ability to spend your money. And this is what I think ticks them off the most. So thank you, Alex. I appreciate the call. Big shout out to everybody listening in New York City on WFAS. And we're going to get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. Give us a call, 833-4VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. And we're continuing our discussion on what happened today in America. If it happened during the day, we're talking about it here at night. That's the tradition of the program, and I love to hear from all of you. Let's continue this now. Joe Biden, President Biden, took a spill, a really hard fall at the Air Force Academy commencement ceremony. And this is, again, I didn't laugh, right? When I saw it, I kind of winced and I felt like, oh man, I remember my dad falling. If anybody's listened to the show, my dad fell down and suffered a traumatic brain injury, and it really changed his life and all of our family. And he eventually recovered, in large part. Some things he never recovered, but in large part he did. And I never take this stuff lightly because, falling up the stairs is one thing, right? When he trips and misses a step and, that's one thing. But when you fall the way he fell, it was a hard fall. It seemed like a hard fall. I'm hoping that the White House will put out a statement later and saying he's all right and everything's fantastic. If they did, I missed it. And I'm glad that they did. And I hope there's no additional announcements from them saying that, there's additional bruising or anything else. But it didn't look good for him. And at a campaign event in, I believe is it Iowa? Des Moines, Iowa. Former President Trump was at a campaign event with Fox News host Sean Hannity. And they were having a back and forth on the Biden fall. And then subsequently they discussed Biden's mental health. But I want you to hear the first part of this clip, which is President Trump, in my opinion, being very gracious and not wanting to get into making fun of Biden and the fall. Listen to this.
I want to start with the current president. Did you see the video of when he fell? Yeah. And did you see the video? He actually said, by the way, I met with, who are those guys that are going to fly over shortly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your president right now.
Not too good. It's sad. It's sad. It's not, it's, they're representing, we are all representing the country. You become president, and you're sort of not allowed to do that, but it's happened. It's happened, and it's happened pretty badly. We won't go into it, but we all know the ones, and they count those acts, they never forget. But that was a bad fall.
So that's President Trump, again, saying it's a pretty serious thing. And I just want to remind everybody, when it was Trump speaking at one of the academies for their graduation, that had to kind of walk very slowly down the ramp, and the general kind of guided him a little bit because he was wearing these leather-bottomed shoes, and he was saying, I didn't want to slip because I knew it was like soap and it was like ice, and I was going to slip straight down if and it was really hot, he was saying, whatever the case was. So I remember, and that was, they were saying, but Trump has all these cognitive deficits. This is a big problem. He's having an issue walking. Just look at it. This is the beginning of Parkinson's. The walls are closing in. I remember the whole thing like yesterday. And it's just amazing how nobody's saying that about Biden right now, right? They're not saying, oh, my gosh, Biden. I mean, you might have me or somebody else saying that, Sean Hannity is taken up to task on that. But I don't hear that happening by and large by the media. And Trump and Hannity also had a difference of opinion on this, where it seemed that Trump didn't want to go after Biden's mental capability. He really kind of took the high road on this one. And Hannity, well, he called him Sippy Cup Joe. Listen to this.
So in past interviews that we've had together, and we've had many over the years, I have asked you repeatedly about what you think about Joe Biden's cognitive state. I've asked you about, is he up to the job physically, mentally? You have been very reluctant to go there. I'm not reluctant. To me, does everyone agree with me that this guy's cognitively not there? I doubt he knows what day of the week it is today. That's how bad I think it's gotten for him. Why are you reluctant to call that out?
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. I actually called Sean, and I asked Sean not to joke about it.
I was joking
because he used to joke about it. And I said, honestly, I don't think it looks good for you or for anybody for you to joke about it, because it's a serious problem.
I was talking about sippy cup and warm milky at night. And
okay, so that's them there going at it there. But again, Trump taking the high road here, saying he didn't want to get into that. And I think it shows some of his discipline as a candidate, where he's doing a lot better in terms of staying on message and keeping it on, I think, the issues that are really important to Americans right now. But this is one, I think, where we should be concerned about Joe Biden. And for me, I feel really bad. I hope he's not hurt. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, says he's, quote unquote, totally fine. I hope he is. But it looked like a really tough spill, and he probably got bruised up in the process. And it just goes to show you that, again, virality is important. And the way you portray America moving forward is also important. Let's go to Doc in Wilmington, Delaware, WDEL. Doc, I know you're one of Biden's neighbors. What say you on this topic?
A couple things. I'll talk about the debt in a moment. I want to talk about President Biden first. It's a well-known fact inside the state of Delaware that he's not doing well. Here's why. Delaware is a tiny state. We only have 3 counties, as you know. We only have 3 cities that are of sizable size. Wilmington, number 1, Dover, number 2, and the town nearest, maybe besides Wilmington, we pronounce it Newark here. About 30,000 people where our university is located. People that I know of that are connected to the Democratic Party here in Delaware are saying President Biden is not doing well physically, and he's not doing well mentally as far as cognitive decline. It's all known all across the state. The media is in total lockdown about it. They won't talk about it, either locally here in the state at any level and nationally. It's one of the biggest scandals of our time as far as I'm concerned, that they won't talk about President Biden and its state of affairs. Now they're on the debt. We have been, according to a lot of authorities, and you won't take a plug for the show, so I'm not going to get cut off. I won't put one on. We have been, as far as the debt goes, and Ross Perot has stated, we have been in very, very deep trouble since 2001 when we've been in decline on the debt. Mm-hmm. When you take into account, Rich, unfunded liabilities, 3 things only. Hear me out. All federal pensions, particularly veterans' pensions, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We've been in the deep end on the federal debt since 2001. What we're doing is we're printing money, we're turning that money into T-bills, and we sell the T-bills to the American people, investors all around the globe, and foreign nations. That's what's paying for our debts, the sale of U.S. government securities.
Yes.
If the reserve currency ever goes off the curve, and at least then countries and the BRICS nations and others refuse to accept dollars for oil and other things, or if countries start to unload their T-bills, as George H.W. Bush would say, we are in deep, deep, deep doo-doo. I'd like your thoughts on that, since you and I go back to the PhD, the big talker here in Philadelphia, where you took my calls when you started there years ago.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for that, Doc. And just a quick shout out to our friends at WPHT. I'm going to see a whole bunch of them. Rich Zioli, Greg Stocker, Dom Giordano. Going to see all of those guys tomorrow at the Talkers Conference. It's a big talk radio conference in New York. And we're all going to be there tomorrow, rubbing elbows with the rest of the talk radio guys from across the country. So I'm glad you brought that up, Doc. But yet you're right. And I don't know if I could put my finger on it as of 2001. I think this has been going on for quite a while. This is the new way of financing things. And most of it started after Nixon took America off of the gold standard. And here we are building this financial house of cards that could potentially come down at any moment. And this is why I feel so strongly about national defense, because if you have this financial house of cards built on fiat currency, okay, that's the way we do it. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what makes the economy go round, and it works. Even though it doesn't work forever, it works for now. And I'm not supporting it. I'm just saying that it does work right now. However, big issue comes into play is people will always respect or fear the United States as long as they are the top dog, the superpower that has all of the armaments to back up, their rhetoric. But the moment that we don't and we can't, and the moment that, our currency's kneecapped, our military's been kneecapped, what's the use? Who needs the United States, right? Who needs the United States if they won't stand up to the Chinese to protect Taiwan? Who needs the United States if they won't stand up to Russia to protect Ukraine? Who needs the United States if you really can't count on them when the proverbial substance hits the fan? And I think that's where we are. So that's why we need a change of leadership at the top to reposition and turn this thing around. Thank you, Doc, for the call. Big shout out to WDEL and everybody else that's out there. We're coming right back to your calls and more. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ. We'll be right back.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So Thursday, June 1st, was the beginning of what those in the LGBTQ movement call Pride Month. And nearly 1 in 10 adults around the globe identify as LGBTQ, according to a new survey. About 9% of adults from around the world identify themselves as LGBTQ, according to this global survey that was released on Thursday. The survey was conducted by Ipsos and found that 3% of those around the world identify as lesbian or gay, 4% as bisexual, 0.9% as pansexual, and 0.9% as asexual. That's weird. The survey noted that those in Generation Z, people born after 1997, were more than twice as likely to identify as bisexual, pansexual, or asexual than millennials, and more than 4 times as likely than those in Generation X and baby boomers. No kidding, right? Anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I want to get back to your calls. Let us go to Chauncey. Chauncey in Redfield, South Dakota, KSDN. Chauncey, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciated some of your guests in the last few weeks. I don't listen to you steady throughout your program, but I usually get it to listen to it a little bit.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciated, Vince Elliott Ephraim. I appreciated him and his talking about Martin Luther King. That was nice the other night.
That was an interesting conversation,
That really was. Yeah, William, the other night talking the Navy guy. I think that was last night. Very interesting.
Yes, sir.
He talked about naked, and I like the way he expressed that. That
right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And
I appreciate the way you relate with people. That's nice. You talk with them and listen to them, and that's really nice. So
now, did you have a comment on religion tonight?
I do, Rick.
Go right ahead.
Kind of brief comments. I really wasn't ready. I was surprised I even got through. But having a measure of wisdom is really a gift from God. And, that's a nice thing. And I appreciate, that people give God a little point in life, a little small interest, in people.
Yeah. I think we should always give a big shout out to God, right? Nothing's possible without the big man upstairs, Chauncey.
Yeah. Thank you. And so at any rate, I just wanted to highlight the value of the Bible, the plan of God, the sovereignty of God, the truths of the Bible, and really it's something that people can't see because they haven't really got into it and they haven't had the right kind of influence so that they can really know biblical things to that extent. And that's something I see in relating to people.
I think you raised a great point, Chauncey. And for me, faith in my life has always played a very important role. And I can tell from the way you speak about faith, it's important to you. And biblical truth is truth nonetheless, right? And oftentimes I think it's probably one of the most accurate history books out there. And when it comes to science, there's always these interesting articles that I see where it shows that, things that we test in science and we experiment with ultimately end up proving the Bible to be right so many times. And I think that's always interesting. Of course, I'm no scientist, nor am I a theologian, but I noticed those things along the way, and I also think it's important to take note of them. Thank you, Chauncey, for the call. Big shout out to everybody listening in Redfield, South Dakota on KSDN. Let us continue our journey across the country. Let's go to Cadmonton, Missouri, KRMS, and check in with our friend Ed. Ed, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I listened to you on the way home from work.
Thank you for listening, my brother. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I read through that bill that was going to be passed. Who knows what that $14 trillion is going to go for. But at the end of the caption I was reading, it says military spending is going to grow, and that's okay so long as it stays in our country. I don't agree with how much we're giving to Ukraine, since they weren't supposed to be attacking Russia inside their own. They're attacking Moscow. They're attacking the border towns with all our drones, and it's obvious we're doing it and we're helping them. It just bothers me.
Listen, well, I think Ukraine has to be able to defend itself. And I think my personal opinion is that they should have taken a more aggressive stance way early on. We didn't because I believe Biden is a true pacifist at heart. And he just wanted to, allow Putin to posture because I think he believes, as long as Putin postures, he gets. But the thing is, it's not just posturing. Putin wants a land grab. He wants to, last time it was Crimea. This time it's that Donbass region and anything else he can get his hands on. So I think Ukraine has to do that. And the reason I think all of this is because it was the United States, I guess it was during the Clinton years, right? Or maybe at the end of the Reagan-Bush years. But there was the Budapest Memorandum of Security Assurances. And I've spoken with a couple of Reagan-era folks that were privy to this stuff. And they've all made it clear that we insisted, and I think Bill Clinton's administration finalized this stuff because I discussed it with Dick Morris when we had him on. But it was ultimately we persuaded them to give up their nukes. And it's a shame, and it's shameful, in my opinion, to say, hey, look, give up your nukes, and we'll protect you. And then Russia comes a knocking, and we don't protect them, right? So I think, this is beyond arming them. We are supposed to protect them, and we didn't do that. And we could protect them as simply as saying, hey, I'm picking up my Oval Office phone, and I'm saying, hi, doesn't matter what my name is, I am the President of the United States, and you know what I can do. So you got to slow your roll because Ukraine's with me. Now, Ukraine may be a bad actor. They may like to launder money. They may like to do lots of bad things. But we have a commitment to them because we made them give up their nukes. So they're in this mess in many ways because of the United States and the policy of disarming them. So I think we owe them that because that's what the Memorandum of Security Assurances was all about. So we've got to keep our word on that front. Now, on the other front, I don't think we should be sending them money hand over fist. For what? They're a bunch of crooks most of the time. Why on earth would you send money to a bunch of guys that, spend more money than Democrats do, right? Don't do it. Don't be silly. So, Ed, I think you raise a very interesting point. There's a lot to be learned as you flip through the pages of this bill. And it's while there is some good with it, there's a lot that's bad with it. I agree with you, Ed.
And, I agree that we should help the little guy like we always do. I agree with that 100%. But there has to be there should be limitations on what they're doing because Russia's even moving nukes around closer to that area.
Sure. They're not going to stay shut, right? They're going to say, you want to send your drones over here? You want to hit this? You want to do that? We're going to flex on you too. And this is why I believe Biden needs to flex his muscle and say, hey, look, I happen to be president of the United States, which still holds a considerable amount of sway, especially when we're the main NATO player and Ukraine is somebody we have a commitment to. So, I mean, for me, this is a no-brainer where it could be resolved diplomatically. That's why when people criticize Trump saying I could end this in 24 hours, I would try to end it in 24 hours too. Because I would make every veiled threat I could and say, look, I'm not going to say what I'm going to do, but I'm telling you, what I'm able to do, and don't force me to do what I'm able to do. I mean, it's just that simple, right? It's like the old gangsters in Brooklyn would say, you want I should introduce you to so-and-so, right? It's like, hey, it's over for you if I introduce you to so-and-so. You don't want that to happen, do you? It would be a shame for something to happen to that nice blah, 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 that type of thing. I mean, ultimately, I think that's the type of diplomacy that we need. Anyway, Ed, thank you for listening faithfully and for calling in tonight. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in Cadmonton, Missouri. And we're going to be coming back momentarily, continuing with your calls. I see we got calls from Jersey in the building, Montana's in the building, and more. Don't go anywhere. It's Rich Valdez, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So there was a simulation of a drone that was being operated by this licensed AI software, artificial intelligence operating this drone. And in a simulation, it killed a human operator in a surreal military test. This AI licensed drone was trained to cause destruction, and it ended up turning on its human operator in a simulated test. So this didn't really happen, but a top Air Force official reportedly revealed this at a London summit. Colonel Tucker Cinco Hamilton said that during the presentation that the future combat air and space capabilities, these artificial intelligence-enabled drones were changed because the drone's task and mission had ended up attacking the human that was operating the drone. And the cautionary tale was relayed in a blog post, blah, 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 blah. We'll go forward. Ultimately, again, a human still had to fire the sign-off to shoot at the site that it had identified. But it was problematic nonetheless that it turned on the person. And, now there's questions around what happens with no-go instructions from humans and getting in the way of the greater mission of the surface-to-air missiles, or the surface-to-air missile sites, what they're calling SAM sites, in this simulation. So crazy, right? We're just talking about Ukraine and how they're hitting Moscow, and we've got our own drones that are killing the drone operator. It's crazy, crazy, absolutely crazy. Anyway, let us continue with your calls. Let's go to Charles. He's listening in Ridgefield, New Jersey. That's close to where I live. Charles, welcome.
How you doing, Rich?
Oh, I'm good. This is Charles Latan.
This is Charles Latan.
Charles Latan is an old friend of mine. Charles Latan, how are you, sir?
I'm all right, brother, man. I've been listening, man. Listen, I haven't been into the politics and stuff like that, but the past few months I've been more focused and more into it, and I'm loving the show, man. I'm just calling to congratulate you. I've been listening the past few days, believe it or not, and I actually was going to call and say Caladrill first, but you were going to know.
Charles Latan, he's from the Caladrill factory.
The Caladrill factory, but very, very good, man. I'm very proud of you, brother. You know, we go a long way, and I'm just happy, man. I'm happy to see you doing big things, and I love everything so far.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. And, I believe it's important for us to have these late night national conversations. And, of course, other hosts are doing it at different parts of the day. I like doing it at night because, A, that's the gig that I got. But, B, because after everybody else has talked about all their news, there's always things that break at night. Like tonight, we had the debt ceiling vote. And for many people, they don't care. But eventually, everybody's going to care, because what happens in Washington ends up affecting your pocket, my pocket, our children's pockets. And ultimately, as we get older and older, we realize, you know what, it's okay to go out and have a good time, but it gets harder and harder to have a good time when the government gets in the way. At least that's my opinion. So I like to have that conversation, and I'm always grateful for people like you that say, look, I'm just a regular guy doing my thing, working in my profession, and I don't care about politics. And I don't care that you care or don't care, because it's not about politics. We do the show, I think, to entertain, to inform, to keep people up to speed on everything that's going on in America. And I do appreciate that, Charles.
Doing a great job, brother. Appreciate you, brother.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you, too. God bless you, my man. Anyway, we're going to continue with the calls. That was a very nice call from my man, Charles. And let's go to Debbie. Debbie is calling us from Grand Island, Nebraska, KRVN. I like that, KRVN. I wonder what those colors stand for. Debbie, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm really, I think something about, it's KRVN. Well, it's Rural Voice of Nebraska. How about that?
Ah, cool. I was thinking Rich Valdez Network, but go right ahead.
Very good. There, it worked. It worked perfectly. You might have to, syndicate a little bit something there with them. I don't know. So,
well, I think we're on.
First time I listened to you tonight. Here I am. And thank you for being on. When I was a young girl, my grandfather had a little transistor radio, and when he woke up at night and he couldn't sleep or wonder what the world was going to be like, he listened to talk radio in the middle of the night, in the middle of the sandhills, way out by KRVN's, I guess, main ground that they broadcasted to. But thank you so much for being there. For a lot of us, I happen to be almost a 9-year-old widow, and it gets pretty lonely at nights. And to have somebody talk about just basic stuff to keep our minds sharp, I appreciate you being out there.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. And I have to say, whatever your family members were listening to was likely my predecessor, the late, great Jim Bohannon, or his predecessor, Larry King. This program's been around for 45 years, and it's an honor to me every day that I get on this microphone to be on a show that's only had 3 hosts in the last 45 years. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to keep you company straight till 1 a.m. Eastern in the morning time. I realize that it is a lonely thing. And as a young man, I wasn't lonely. I wasn't anything. I was looking for traffic and news and weather one day, and I found a guy named Curtis Sliwa talking on the radio, arguing with another guy named Ron Kuby. And I got hooked on talk radio after that. I said, this is some of the best stuff I've heard ever. And I was dropping off my now 22-year-old daughter at daycare when she was just a wee little tot. So thank you, Debbie. Very kind words from you, and I appreciate it. Feel free to call anytime. I am your friend in the evening, and I'm grateful for your listenership. Big shout out to Grand Island, Nebraska, and everybody on KRVN. Thank you, Debbie, and we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
Of course, I mentioned earlier that it is Pride Month. That's this thing that they've created to celebrate LGBTQ. And there's a magazine called Glamour in the United Kingdom, British Glamour as it's known, and they're introducing Logan Brown, their Pride cover star. It is a woman with short hair, what I'm seeing, that identifies as a man. So this is what I believe what they call a trans man that is pregnant with a very large belly. And listen to a quote. I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. I was like, my whole world just stopped. That everything, all my manlyhood that I've worked hard for so long just completely felt like it was erased. Brown was on a break from her testosterone treatment, but had this weird feeling about the possibility of being pregnant. And she was thinking to herself, I was really hard on myself because how do you tell your partner, I'm pregnant, but I'm also your boyfriend as well? The reaction had mixed emotions for both of us, she said. She said she went on to feel shame and was feeling hard on herself and saying you can enjoy this process and make it really difficult for yourself or not. And saying, I'm a pregnant man and we're very lucky and I'm proud to do what we're doing. Thank you for listening to the show tonight. Frank in Evergreen, I'm sorry I had to get that last story in there, and I know you wanted to talk about forest fires, so we'll get to those tomorrow, I promise. I am Rich Valdez. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless, and keep it locked right here on this station. There's more programming. I'll be back tomorrow.